I'm going to start this with my relationship with Blizzard, which began when I was a very small human being. I was like 8 or 10 or something like that. Warcraft 2 BattleNet Edition came out, and my friend had it, and he showed me, not the game, he didn't show me the game, he actually showed me the booklet of the game, which had these incredible illustrations on it. And there was this word on many of those illustrations that said Metzin, and I didn't know what a Metzin was, but it was cool, and so I tried to draw all the Metzins. And I had really great visual art teachers growing up, but that moment in time for me was this opening of my imagination, and I just started pouring myself into visual art in school and drawing and learning different mediums and things like that. I eventually didn't, when I was going to college, I made the choice to go for music and not visual art, but it was very much it was one or the other kind of a thing. I was trying to decide between which path I was going to take. Which, by the way, is not very practical. Watch out for that one. But yeah, so that's how it started. Eventually I did play Warcraft 2, and I grunt rushed people on bridge-to-bridge combat for hours on end, which was great. Moved to StarCraft. When StarCraft came out, that was incredible. Spent copious amounts of time playing StarCraft. Not competitively. I played Big Game Hunters and Test of Survival and Evolves and Zone Control and things like that. And then StarCraft 2 came out, which, by the way, was a joke, kind of like Fallout 3, which is just sort of like, yeah, that's going to happen when StarCraft 2 comes out. I was in the basement of my friend's house. We were playing Final Fantasy. We had set up we did this for years in a row. We would take a week out of our summer vacation, being the computery, gamey nerds that we were. We would set two TVs on the side of each other, 2 PlayStations, and we would play Final Fantasy VIII from the beginning to the end. And we would kind of like race each other to see who could get it done first. And I had all these charts for the efficiency of the different GFs and how to align them and what the most efficient party was. Which, if you know any of my content, you won't be surprised at all. But we were having that marathon, one of them, and a mutual friend of ours called us up and said, "Hey, StarCraft 2 is coming out." And we're like, "Yeah, okay. Do you want to hang out?" Like, very funny. And they're like, "No, like, really, you need to go online, check out this video." And it was Mike Morhaime. At that point, I didn't know anything about Blizzard. That was the first time I had seen Mike Morhaime. He got up there and, very emotionally delivered this announcement. Hell, it's about time. Here we are. StarCraft 2, it's coming out. And we watched that video over and over again, and I immediately I just became a StarCraft fanatic at that point in time. I played StarCraft all the time. I started to try and get competitive. I made it all the way down to D- on the iCup ladder. I got the Chaos Launcher and all that type of stuff. I played Zerg, and it was terrible. And, my double layer lurker drop build it was not great. And StarCraft 2 came out, and that was great. I was on tour when StarCraft 2 came out, and I didn't have a smartphone yet. And so my friend, that same friend actually with the Final Fantasy Marathon friend, he was texting me build orders that he was finding online from the beta. And I was writing them down in a notebook, because when you're on tour, most of your time is spent in a van waiting to get to wherever you're going. And so I would just write them over and over and over and over in the notebook. And I would try to visualize building the supply depot on 10. I was like, all right, build the supply depot on 10, and all these types of things, which didn't work at all. I got back from from tour, and StarCraft had been out at that point, but we planned a LAN party, and all of our friends got together. We packed my basement with 20 kids and 20 computers, and we just, we played StarCraft all day. Actually, I came home from tour. It was probably like an 8-hour drive, the last drive from the last stop, and immediately started playing StarCraft 2 and didn't sleep all night. My friends came over in the morning to play StarCraft, kept playing StarCraft all day long, and then eventually did go to sleep. And my final step, my final evolution in my relationship with Blizzard happened on an episode of State of the Game where Liquid Noni, or Noonie, said that he was using the custom hotkeys, which came out in 2011, year after StarCraft 2 came out, to, I think it was, bind his Phoenix to W as a control group. And that just like, oh, wait a second, wait a minute, wait. If you can put a control group on a letter, anything is possible. And I just started like breaking apart all of these preconceived notions about hotkeys that I'd had. I started like rebuilding a more efficient hotkey layout. And that is eventually what what led me to meet Foxy Mayhem, who's still one of my best friends to this day. And a lot of just awesome people. And that led me on to sell everything that I owned. I sold my car, I sold my guitars, my piano, all my instruments, and sold my rock climbing gear. I sold everything that I owned in order to survive long enough for a year without any income to try and make a career in doing content for StarCraft 2. And it worked, kind of. It was sort of, my StarCraft 2 content creation career has been sort of like just running off of cliffs and hoping that something catches me before I hit the ground, and then doing that again and again and again. And eventually I did hit the ground, but I made, 6 or 7 really fun jumps, free falling with no security or much sort of hope of anything occurring. But eventually, I did finally fail. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. And I've bought everything in StarCraft. I was always begging. I was one of the people, Blizzard, please let me give you my money. I had 4 copies of StarCraft 2 before they separated MMR so I could have an account for each of the races and random. Like, I would buy my friends copies of StarCraft 2. You got to play this game. Like, it's an amazing game. You got to do it. And so microtransactions, free to play came out for StarCraft 2. I just bought everything. And to this day, I've bought every single thing that you can buy in StarCraft 2, which is not a whole lot, but I've bought it all on principle. And I don't even like skins, to be honest. I don't really use most of the voice packs. I throw Abathur on and I'm good to go. But it was the point. It was the principle of the thing that I wanted to communicate to Blizzard and by proxy Activision that StarCraft 2 is something that's worth supporting. And you got Hearthstone and everyone's buying packs of cards and you got loot boxes and in Overwatch, but StarCraft is, you gotta support that too. It's a very special thing. And which is why it's really sad to have come to the point now where I won't be buying anything from Blizzard or Activision ever again. I'm done. And that's because of this whole Blitzchung incident, which I'm not going to go over what happened or what's going on in Hong Kong and all of that type of stuff. If you want to get educated about it, I think you should. I'm going to give sort of my perspective on why I'm doing this. And then I'll go over some of the sort of common rebuttals that have been coming up in the community that are more for the keep giving Blizzard money route. I think there's a sort of fish swimming around in the water effect that's going on where if you live in a country that has freedom of speech, it's really difficult for you to understand how significant it is. And the thing that sort of brought it home for me was the idea that throughout human history, there are only 2 ways that human beings have ever settled disputes. Only 2. There's speech, expression, right? That doesn't mean literally just words, also art and poetry and comics and all that type of stuff, right? There's speech, agreements, laws, and there's violence. And that's it. That's all there is. And so this might be my American bias, but to me, freedom of speech is sort of the ultimate human right. And it unlocks the potential for people to criticize their governments and to have a say in what's going on in their lives. And ultimately is a force for good, is a force for the reduction of violence in the world, which has been happening, by the way, and is continuing to get better. But I think it's something that needs to be protected, understood, and continued. I think that in the ideal scenario is that human beings become less and less violent over time, and we learn to settle more of our disputes with speech. And so one of the sort of pitfall arguments, I think, where technically it's an argument, but it's not an argument I'm going to make, I don't think it's particularly strong, is the idea that the freedom of speech of Blitzchung, the player, the Hearthstone player, is what's being undermined here. And that sort of gets into a whole rut of, well, technically the rules and technically they're a company and all that type of stuff. But that's not why I'm cutting my support to Blizzard. I'm cutting my support to Blizzard because they are representing a philosophy that has totally just the opposite of everything that I thought that Blizzard was, or everything that Blizzard was in the past. Chris Metzen is gone. Mike Morhaime is gone. They're not at Blizzard anymore. So many people at Blizzard are gone. Much of the StarCraft 2 team is gone. Dustin Browder's gone. There's been a big turnover, or maybe just culling of certain people, but I think fundamentally that this is a different Blizzard. This is Activision Blizzard, and calling Blizzard just Blizzard anymore doesn't really make sense. And so it's not the freedom of speech that Blitzchung that I'm concerned about. It's the freedom of speech of the people of Hong Kong. And, as a whole, the freedom of speech of the people of China. People are getting tear gassed and shot at with rubber bullets and beaten by unmarked peoples, not even riot cops. I mean, they're getting beaten by riot cops, but they're also getting beaten by this sort of self-organized, or who knows, organized paramilitary forces, like children and women, families on the subway defending themselves with umbrellas, against fully decked out riot cops. And I'm not going to say that hasn't happened in America, because it has, but I'm going to oppose that wherever it exists. And the fact that all this guy did, this Hearthstone player, Blitzchung, all he did was say the rally cry of that movement as a sort of message of support to bring awareness to the situation. And they issued out penalty to him. And were they technically allowed to do that by their rules? Yes. The rules were set intentionally in a vague way so that they could do essentially whatever they wanted to do. That also means that they could have done nothing. They could have let it go. But they chose not to. And that sends a signal that they're more interested in maintaining a good relationship with the government of China to maintain access to that player base and that profit than to let someone express their support for the freedoms of millions of people, millions and millions of people. If you count all of China, it's 1.5 billion people. And I'm sure that they made the calculated risk and they said, all right, we're going to get a little bit of backlash from the community. They'll get mad for a little bit and then they'll get over it. They'll come back, which probably will happen. Most people probably won't hold to their commitments that they make. That generally is the way it goes. BlizzCon is going to come and they're going to announce new games and people are going to say, you know what? I really want to play this new Blizzard game. And they're going to let go of their boycott. That's probably going to happen. But it's not really the point. It's kind of like dealing with a bully. As a small human, and growing up, I was always very small, very skinny kid. Even when in high school, I made it to my top height, 6 feet tall, and I was about 110 pounds in high school. So to give you an idea of my weakness physically. And when you're a weak human being, you run into a lot of bullies. And I did run into a lot of bullies, and I found that the way that you deal with a bully is not to just accept whatever bullying that they're doing to you. The way to deal with a bully is to do as much damage as you can on your way down to the ground. Because ultimately, you're going to lose. They're bigger than you. They're stronger than you. They know how to fight better than you, probably. But that's not the point. The point is that you don't give it to them for free. They don't get to just take whatever joy from tormenting you that they get for free. You do damage. There's a principle to it, but there's also a very real psychological conditioning going on where bullies are cowards and they're going for the weak of the herd, That's why they came after me. And this is like that. I don't think that what I'm doing and what people like me are doing is going to destroy Blizzard, but I'm going to do damage on my way down to the ground. And I'm okay with that. I want to make a distinction. I will still be playing StarCraft, and I will still be streaming and making videos for a time. And maybe that's not doing as much damage as I could. Maybe that's not full commitment. But to me, the difference between not giving them money and not giving them any of my airtime or my playing time is very small. And maybe I'll be streaming and people will ask me, it's like, oh, hey, Jack, did you see the new skins? I'm like, yeah. It's like, oh, you're going to get them? It's like, no. Why? It's like, and then I will tell them why. And so I will be a beacon of bad PR. And maybe that'll counteract the fact that I'm still playing their game. It's not perfect, but that's where I am. So one of the primary rebuttals to this position is that there shouldn't be politics in esports. And there's a slippery slope fallacy, I think, going on here where people are thinking, well, if we let Blitzchung do this, then there's going to be someone coming in saying that this specific policy or this specific candidate deserves your vote, blah, 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 right? And to me, there are a lot of different small political things, candidates and policies and things like that. And some of them are big and some of them are significant. I don't want to undermine that. But when you put them up against the fundamental right of people to criticize their government and to express themselves freely. I don't think it's just such a different thing. I just put that on a totally different level. You know, freedom of speech is not just politics, it's fundamental human right. And so that's how I feel about it. I kind of make that distinction. I think some other people make that distinction as well. Secondly, Blizzard is a little bit hypocritical here in that Alan Brack in his one of the responses that Blizzard has made, maybe the only one, said that if it were the other way, we would have done the exact same thing, and no politics in our broadcast. Blah blah blah. I was like, okay, but now I totally support this. Saying this ahead of time, I totally support this, but there was a Pride event, and that's awesome. There was a Pride event for the Overwatch League. That's political. That's politics. And not only did it happen, but it was Blizzard's sponsor. It was their producers. It was their people doing that. And again, I think it's an awesome thing. I think that people of the LGBT community deserve to live a fear-free life, a discrimination-free life, just like the rest of us deserve that. I think all individuals, all people, deserve to be treated on their actions and their merits and not to be judged by, how they identify or any of that stuff. It all comes together. It's people ought to be treated as individuals, as much as possible. That's my perspective. But you can't say like, oh, well, we're going to penalize this guy for supporting the freedom of expression of the people of Hong Kong, among other things. But generally speaking, they're trying to advocate for their rights for some particular things, and they're being suppressed as a result of advocating for that, which is a suppression of free speech. So you have that in the one hand, and then we are going to support this over here, this Pride event, which is awesome. And I'm saying that a lot because people get triggered very easily, and I want you all to be sure what side I'm on. So yeah, Blizzard's being hypocritical about saying no politics in their broadcasts, and freedom of speech is not just politics. It's a fundamental human right. The other rebuttal that comes across is, well, why are you doing this right now? It kind of goes along in the same vein of, well, if this was so important to you, why didn't you say anything before? Or what about all these other awful things that are happening in the world? Why aren't you saying anything about that? Why aren't you doing anything about that? And I think it's really bandwagoning, right? That's what they're calling it, saying you're bandwagoning. You're doing this for the views or the clicks, or I don't know, gaining some sort of virtue signaling or status out of doing this. I only knew about this. I knew sort of tangentially about the Hong Kong stuff. I was like, I knew there was a protest going on. I was like, okay, great. People are advocating for their rights. You go. Awesome. I'm over here in America. I don't think there's much I can do to help you guys, but I think that's great. And so I found out about this whole thing as a result of this whole scandal, Blitzchung saying what he did and Blizzard's response and all that stuff. And so that was kind of the point, Blizzard made a mistake, or made a decision, a calculated decision to take a hit and, penalize this guy. And as a result, I have spent a bunch of time watching videos and reading up about this whole movement that's going on in Hong Kong right now. And it's not that I didn't care. Well, I didn't care about it before as much because I didn't know about it. And I didn't do anything before because I didn't really feel like I had an opportunity to. But now all of a sudden, I'm presented with this opportunity. All I have to do, and this isn't hard, okay? all I have to do is not give money to a particular company. StarCraft's free. I can still play it without giving Blizzard any more monetary support. To me, it's just like a no-brainer. It's so easy. And by doing this easy thing, I can give a little bit of pressure to a big, powerful entity that is putting, has a relationship with an even bigger entity, mainly China, right? Blizzard, Activision, Blizzard to China, right? And of course I'm going to do that. I don't know. To me, it seems like an automatic decision. And I've taken a little while to come out with this video because at the time that this happened, I was very angry. And I didn't really know what was going on. But I felt very angry. And I'm still pretty angry. But I don't like myself very much when I'm angry. And I think that when something important is happening that, I like to take my time and learn about it and calm down a little bit and try to give a sort of measured response to what's going on. And I want to make the caveat that some of the response of people was to go after, content creators and casters and people like this and unsubbing to Twitch channels. And I appreciate the passion. I understand that, but you're only hurting the content creators. You're not going to touch Blizzard doing that. You're only hurting them. And there's also people attacking the employees of Blizzard. They didn't make that decision, right? My stance here is that the people at the top, right? The people making decisions, those are the people that I blame. Those are the people that I'm angry at. Not the, I have friends that, that work at Blizzard that I think are still great people, even if they keep working for Blizzard. And some of them were protesting at the orc statue. That was awesome. And the content creators are going to do their thing. And maybe not all of them are going to say something. That's their right? Freedom of speech means also the freedom not to say anything if you don't want to. And it works as a fundamental across the board thing. You don't get to say freedom of speech except the things that I find disagreeable, because then the whole thing falls apart. Then whoever is in control and gets to say what's disagreeable, they actually end up suppressing the freedom of speech of a certain group of people or a certain idea. And that's not how we get better. We get better by everyone putting their ideas into the basket, into the melee of ideas, and seeing what comes out the winner. That means the bad ideas too. If it's such a bad idea, whatever it is, whatever the thing that you find distasteful is, then you should be able to defeat it with your words. And if you can't defeat it with your words, then the solution is not to go to the government and tell them to squelch the speech of this thing that you dislike. The solution is to level up and understand the situation better and do battle with your words. Because in the end, there's violence in their speech. I choose speech. I hope you do too.